All right. Happy Festivus for the rest of us. Uh, I'm going to play the story of Festivus, and I hope you enjoy it. Uh, it's some good humor and explains the whole idea of December 23rd. But it doesn't have to be December 23rd. But anyway, I hope you enjoy. This is the story of Festivus.
Hachette Audio presents Festivus, the holiday for the rest of us. Written by Alan Salkin and read by Alan Salkin, Eliza Foss, Alan Sklar, and Oliver Wyman, with a foreword written and read by Jerry Stiller.
Ah! Who needs this? Humbug!
A foreword by Jerry Stiller.
In the ancient days when gods played their own games and had their own celebrations, tossing lightning bolts between mountaintops, hurling great boulders, Festivus came out of that. It's a holiday that celebrates being alive at a time when it was hard to be alive. There was no Christ yet, no Yahweh, no Buddha. There were great ruins and raw nature, but there was a kindling spark of hope among men. They celebrated that great thunderous storms hadn't enveloped them in the past year, that landslides hadn't destroyed them. They made wishes that their crops would grow in the fields, that they'd have food the next year, and the wild animals wouldn't attack and eat them. There's something pure about Festivus, something primal, raw in the hearts of humans. And then there is the idea of an aluminum pole, the centerpiece of the modern celebration of Festivus. Airplanes are made out of aluminum to take you through life from one place to another, in one piece usually. Aluminum is a type of metal that can say so much if something is done to it, like turning it into an airplane. But there's nothing to an aluminum pole. It has no feeling. It says, I am what I am. You endow the aluminum pole with whatever you want to. It leaves you open to explore your own meaning. It is lightweight stuff, but in the form of an airplane, it gets you from one part of the world to the next. Remember that. And one more thing on aluminum. You don't want to put too many M's into it. Aluminum is easy to say, but don't think too much before you say it out loud. If you think too much about how you say it before you say it, you'll screw it up. So with these sparks of godly and individual human imagination flying, I say this. A Festivus miracle to me would be not having to give anybody a gift during the time of year we call the holidays, and not feeling like I've shortchanged anyone or hurt their feelings. The other end of the miracle would be that if I didn't get a gift from someone I expected it from, I wouldn't think, why didn't they remember me? Nope. Just wipe the slate clean. I mean, most of the time when you get a gift, you have to prove to the gift giver how much you love what they gave you. It takes a toll on you. I receive letters sometimes from people describing every little thing about the gifts I've sent to them. I don't even remember what I've sent. These people should have more in their lives. Which brings me to wrestling, another centerpiece of Festivus, the feats of strength. Wrestling is raw, primal. With my own son, I used to tumble around. He always used to come on top for some reason. He was very agile. I let him win, of course. Snails are primal, too. It's no coincidence there is a snail called Festivus. The snail is the ocean. Earth, wind, fire, water, the essential elements. For Festivus, make it earth, wind, fire, and snails. That's why, if I'm to air my grievances here, I say, let's cut this holidays thing. Let's cut it down to the bare minimum. I'm not alone in feeling this way, but very few people will actually say it out loud. Then, these things like Festivus come along. Something that makes its way onto a sketch on Seinfeld or Saturday Night Live or another show just like that. It comes out of something that's in the air. It resonates and people run with it. For some people, the revelation comes too late that life is best kept to the essentials. Some people are given their last rites, and that person might say in their last breath, I should have celebrated Festivus. Look, I'm not trying to be an anti-consumer Jerry the curmudgeon here. I'm a Gucci man, a Prada man myself. I buy gifts from these stores. People have a right to purchase things if they want to. All I'm saying is, if you celebrate Festivus, you may live a little longer. You are getting back to the essentials, to the days of gods on mountaintops and howling wolves, because you are saying the holidays are in the heart, a celebration of being alive with our fellow humans. For that purpose, an aluminum pole will do just as well as anything else, as long as it's not stuck in the wrong place.
Thanks, Jerry. Hey, this is the author, Alan Salkin. And before we begin our journey into the world of Festivus, I want to make one thing clear. Everything in this audiobook is 100% true. People in the real world are actually celebrating Festivus, and you'll hear their names throughout this audiobook. The only fiction components of the program are the actors we've hired to stand in for these real people. Actors have better voices than normal humans, so think of it this way. They're small fibs placed here for your listening pleasure. Good. Got the disclaimer out of the way. Let's start with
The history of Festivus.
most Festivus-friendly people believe the holiday was born December 18th, 1997, the day the Festivus episode of Seinfeld was first broadcast. Those people are wrong. Seinfeld, undeniably, presented this unfamiliar holiday in a seductively bitter light. The TV version of Festivus featured a bare aluminum pole in the place of honor many families reserve for a tinsel-draped Christmas tree, an airing of grievances in which friends, family, and acquaintances accuse each other of being a disappointment, and a feats of strength component, requiring that the holiday not end until the head of the household is wrestled to the floor and pinned. Millions of people loved it, or at least snickered at the holiday with dark pleasure. Within days of that first airing, some early adopters began celebrating their own versions of Festivus, buying poles at Home Depot, wrestling each other, and airing grievances. Something about the holiday's anti-cheer was delivering an antidote to the tinsely tee-hee tyranny of forced joviality that rules the modern holidays. Festivus felt right. But despite what most Seinfeld watchers believed, this was not the first time Festivus had felt right to the masses. In various forms through the millennia, humans have celebrated holidays called Festivus. A version flourished in ancient Rome. It morphed through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and manifested strangely in 19th century California before flowering again in upstate New York in the 1960s. What's amazing is that through its many incarnations, Festivus has always uniquely managed to express the spirit of its age just as it does now. No one has ever owned it. It is populist. It adapts. Uncontrolled by any ruling power, Festivus just grows. Some Festivus lovers may have a hard time believing that the holiday for the rest of us predates the 20th century. One hopes these Philistines are aware there was civilized life prior to television. If so, let's briefly travel back in time. This history lesson will end soon, but history can be fun. Remember the movie Troy with horses and the funny boats and the revealing togas? This is like that. In the 3rd century BCE, the Roman comic poet Plautus used the word Festivus to refer to wild celebrations attended by common folk. Brian A. Krostenko, an associate professor of classics at the University of Notre Dame, has studied the meaning of Festivus in the ancient world and found that even then it was something that evolved to fit its times. He'll now share with us his well-known monograph on the subject, Ancient Festivi.
Thank you, Alan. Ladies and gentlemen, humans have celebrated Festivus for at least 2,200 years. In ancient Rome, Festivus originally meant pertaining to a festal day, a religious celebration. The word shows up in various forms according to the grammatical rules of Latin: festivo, festivum, and many others. For example, in the poet Plautus's Miles Gloriosus, Braggart Soldier, one character says, Nunqua ad sedistis causa in festivo loco. Now, to come to the reason why you've gathered here in this festal place. For most of the year, Roman society was hierarchical and restrictive, but on religious holidays, dies festi, people of all classes were allowed to gather and express frivolity. From this sprung uses like festivum facinus, a jolly trick, or an impish prank, plautus penalus, little Carthaginian, and the use of Festivus as a term of endearment, meaning the kind of agreeable one can be after a day of wine and song. The mid-2nd century was a time of vast social change in the Roman Republic. The social elite began throwing dinner parties, like the ones they imagined the ancient Greeks had enjoyed. Festivus adapted, gaining a satirical spin. Thus, in the alas fragmentary Menippean satires of Marcus Terentius Varro, omnes videmur, nobis esse belle festivi, saperdae cum simus saproi. We are jolly and jovial, so we think, though in fact we stink like fetid fish. Incidentally, the saperda was a nasty fish. The lines parody the self-importance and would-be elegance of dinner-table wits. The orator Cicero refers to a festivum acroama, a delightful diversion, in verum against Verres, referring ironically to Verres's habit of making off with something valuable of his hosts whenever he left a party. As Christianity pervaded the empire, Festivus referred not only to dinner parties and rituals in churches, but also to merriments associated with pagan feast days. This ensured the continuation of the word into the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and beyond. From festus was derived the vulgar Latin festa, the source of Spanish fiesta and Old French feste. This was borrowed into Middle English in the form feast, and continued to develop in French itself, becoming fête. The Latin festivus and festivitas became the French festif and festivité, which in turn were borrowed into Middle English as festive and festivity. Festivus lives.
Fascinating, Professor. Just, well, great. Festivus continued to repercuss through the ages. In 1844, the word's irrepressible hold on the human subconscious manifested itself in the brain of marine biologist Richard Brinsley Hines, who had just discovered a carnivorous sea snail off the coast of Southern California. He dubbed the snail Festivus. The biologist is dead, and no one knows why he used that name, but it was likely inspired by the creature's party-like shell, a spectacular melange of ribbons, spikes, crests, and bulbous lumps decorated with brown stripes and flared ridges. Like Festivus's modern metamorphosis as a holiday, the snail has a bite and a knack for survival. The 40 to 50 millimeter long crustacean survives by using its razor-sharp radula to bore through the shells of other mollusks. It then inserts its proboscis into the hole and sucks the other creature out and into its digestive system, says Lindsay Groves, a malacologist at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. The Festivus snail spends its dozen-year lifespan in shallow coastal waters off Southern California and Baja. They leave a slime, Groves says. That's how others of the same species find each other. Even as a proboscis-slinging bottom feeder, Festivus has proven irresistible. The reason we chose it for the name of our publication, which started in 1970, was it had a double meaning, says Carol Hertz, co-founder of the Festivus, a scholarly journal published by the San Diego Shell Club. Recent headline, Northern Range Extension for Natalia natalii. It was not only the name of a species in this area, but it also sounded festive. Clearly at the late midpoint of the 20th century, Festivus was not merely surviving as an obscure Latin root. It was percolating, ready to be served full and steaming unto the world again. And so, in 1966, a New York intellectual named Daniel O'Keefe, who had an interest in pagan rituals and magic, was casting about for a name for a holiday to commemorate the anniversary of his first date with his wife. O'Keefe, 76, when interviewed in 2004, says the word Festivus just popped into his head. But with his ongoing research of ancient celebrations, it is likely the Roman use of the word was swimming around in O'Keefe's head, ready to be reborn when the right occasion came calling. As children were born into the O'Keefe household, Festivus continued to be celebrated there through the 1970s, evolving into more than the celebration of an anniversary. It gained unorthodox rituals. There was a clock in a bag, said O'Keefe's son, also named Daniel O'Keefe, adding that he does not know what it symbolized. Most of the Festivi had a theme, he continued. One was, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Another was, too easily made glad? As always, Festivus had arrived without dogma, a vessel which accepted what was poured into it from the hearts of the mortals who summoned it. O'Keefe poured in a steaming brew of the philosophy that eventually flowered into his book, Stolen Lightning, The Social Theory of Magic. In the background was Durkheim's Elementary Forms of Religious Life, he recalled, saying that religion is the unconscious projection of the group, and then the American philosopher Josiah Royce, religion is the worship of the beloved community. In other words, Festivus for the O'Keefes strived to be an expression of what was happening organically within the family's brains, not something that they were told by outside forces should be happening inside them. There was no pull, but there were airings of grievances into a tape recorder and wrestling matches between the younger Daniel and his two brothers. The younger Daniel grew up and became a writer on Seinfeld. There, he appropriated and adapted the family holiday for a subplot of episode number 166, officially titled The Strike because of a plot involving the character Kramer's work stoppage against a bagel shop. O'Keefe the Younger was the story editor on what has since become known by fans and the Festivus faithful as the Festivus episode. He wrote the script along with Alec Berg and Jeff Schaefer. For Seinfeld, Festivus again showed it as something that can be adapted to fit anything, even the requirements of a show about nothing. On the sitcom, the character Frank Costanza tells Kramer that he invented the holiday when his children were young and he found himself in a department store tug-of-war with another Christmas shopper over a doll. Frank recounts,
I realized there had to be a better way.
So Frank coined the slogan, a Festivus for the rest of us, and formulated other rituals. The holiday occurs on December 23rd, features a bare aluminum pole instead of a tree, forbids tinsel, and does not end until the head of the family is wrestled to the floor and pinned. The final act of the episode shows a Festivus party at the Costanza house. Just as the holiday changed for television, most notably with the addition of the pole, the original O'Keefe Festivus in Chappaqua, New York, was constantly in flux. It was entirely more peculiar than on the show, the younger Mr. O'Keefe said. Because of that, both he and his father blessed the sometimes bizarre variations the holiday has assumed in the wider world. Still, the elder Mr. O'Keefe worries, have we accidentally invented a cult? Perhaps. The holiday has grown like mad in the real world, from a Festivus disc golf tournament in Oregon to a living room in Kentucky where a cat with a special lion-cut hairdo frolics during Festivus, to a Festivus carol sung baudily at an annual party in Manitoba, to a Festivus wine bottled on a working oil field in Oklahoma. Festivus is a gloriously fertile vine spreading everywhere. Festivus has been embroiled in a free speech controversy in Florida, a Super Bowl victory in Baltimore, and a tax policy debate in Washington, D.C. Festivus is just a word, and maybe that is its magic. There is no ruling force, no humans claiming otherworldly authority to dictate its rules and ordain its leaders. Festivus describes whatever it is people want to celebrate. Thanks to its star turn on Seinfeld, a few bare-bones rituals have become loosely attached to Festivus, but none of these are sacred. All, as is apparent throughout this audiobook, are malleable, easily discarded in favor of something more suited to the group celebrating Festivus at any particular moment. Something about a holiday that requires no tinsel, no trees, no dripping wax, no harvest horn of plenty, and no flattery resonates more loudly every year. It could be that people are fed up with the commercialism of the holidays, or that there is a great yearning for an all-inclusive secular theme for December gatherings. Or it could be that Festivus is just irresistibly silly. One thing is for sure, Festivus is big. In mid-2006, there were about 835,000 Google hits for Festivus, up from 118,000 in 2005 when it was growing by a whopping 3,000 a month. Festivus has grown way beyond Seinfeld, just as it evolved beyond what it was for the rabble of ancient Rome. It is beyond anything that can be controlled by anyone. That's what makes it so much fun.
Preparing for the Festivus party. When is Festivus?
For many celebrants, Festivus is not observed instead of the more traditional December holidays, but in addition to them, perhaps as an antidote to them. Festivus is often celebrated in the places people actually live and work, rather than the ancestral homes they must travel long distances to reach. Festivus is a holiday of choice rather than a required family holiday. That's why December 23rd, the date for Festivus given on Seinfeld, is seen only as a suggestion, one that is usually ignored in favor of dates that don't breathe into the travel dates surrounding the more exclusive holidays. Early December dates are popular. But any day of the year can be Festivus, and, ever flexible, it can involve travel too. For the extended Keller family, Festivus comes in July. An aluminum tent pole is erected in the center of an Ontario, Canada campground, and an airing of grievances is held around the fire. People tell embarrassing stories about themselves, says Therese Keller, 40, an editor at the Edmonton Journal, and kids are allowed to air grievances against their parents. Even at the height of summer, the delicious darkness of Festivus can flourish. One year, Therese Keller's son expressed his disappointment about the time she didn't bring him to a hockey game in which Wayne Gretzky played. Next, a female family member was ridiculed for once being so occupied flipping her hair coquettishly at a construction worker that she walked blindly into a glass door. Therese Keller's brother Bob topped everyone another year with his grievance against his own body, revealing a secret not even his sister had known. He has 3 breasts, Therese Keller says, explaining that she finally understood why she'd never seen her brother with his shirt off. 3 nipples. Festivus is any time, pretty much any way.
The pole.
This unadorned length of lusterless metal or something that looks like metal is the one totem of Festivus which nearly everyone agrees is essential. It has a starkness that sets it apart from the pageantry of other winter holidays, said Patrick Baker, a cryobiologist at the University of Miami, Ohio, who attended his first Festivus party in 2004. It's not telling you better days are ahead or anything else.
Types.
Many different types of pole are used. For the party Baker attended in Oxford, Ohio, the host pried a support post from a set of steel shelves to serve as a pole and anchored it in a box filled with dumbbell weights. At financial analyst Mike Osiecki's annual Festivus in Atlanta, the aluminum fence post he bought for $10 at a hardware store is suspended by fishing line on his porch so that people can stare at it or dance around it if they want to. The pole is generally metal or looks like it is metal. On the Seinfeld Festivus episode, the character Frank Costanza says his pole is aluminum, a substance he praises for its very high strength-to-weight ratio. In the real world, Festivus celebrants have used cardboard tubes painted silver, aluminum foil, and heating pipes.
Acquisition.
Poles are typically purchased at Home Depot, where a 6 to 10 foot custom cut of 2-inch diameter aluminum electrical conduit thick enough to lever up a tipped-over Winnebago sells for about $20. A 1/4-inch diameter pole that is nearly thin enough to pick shrimp bits from a friend's teeth across the room goes for under $5. The poles can be found in the plumbing department. eBay shoppers in December 2004 could find a lighted Festivus pole, not to be confused with Christmas tree, at the buy it now price of $45. The item was described as hand-polished alum pole, base made from MDF and hand-painted, a veil with blinking bulb or standard bulb. Pictures do not show the finish of this item well. Rival Amazon.com's online store featured a Festivus brushed steel pole lamp, which looked a lot like a regular pole lamp. One customer wrote in his review of the item, "This is a pretty good, sturdy yet light enough Festivus pole to adorn your December 23rd holiday, but what's with the attached lights? I say strip 'em off." Free pre-owned poles are also abundant, and their use helps to preserve the world's dwindling aluminum pole forests. Dumpsters outside building demolitions often hold ample lengths of used conduits, pipes, and flagpoles. These items will be free, but while diving in the dumpster, veterans advise, it is best to avoid touching anything that looks like asbestos or which has hair. Heading to the closet has been found to solve the pole problem. By removing hanging clothes, the rod becomes available. If it's made of wood, it can be wrapped in foil. What was once obfuscated under hangers can become the star of the party.
Mounting.
If the pole is roughly the same height as the distance between a home's floor and ceiling, it can simply be wedged between the two. This approach might not set the classiest mood, as exemplified by the experience of Ryan Miles, a strobe light salesman from Nashville, Tennessee. For 3 Festivi, the plural of Festivus, Miles, 29, has jammed a pole between the ceiling and floor of the hallway that opens onto the den of his rented house. Of his annual party, he notes, "The guest list includes close friends and fewer girls attending each year." It may not only be the pole that dissuades the opposite sex. It could be the beverage of choice, a Festivus invention of Ryan and his friends called swill. It's made by pouring a case of beer, a fifth of vodka, and 3 frozen lemonade concentrates into a cooler. The foam will settle, Ryan assures. There are tidier techniques. An elegant one is filling a large flower pot with sand and working the pole into the center. Some Festivusers in Texas take the trouble to screw brackets into the floor and ceiling to hold their pole in place. Trevor Hare in Tucson worms his into a 1-gallon tub filled with rocks. Unlike Ryan, Trevor exhibits class. When Festivus season passes, he says, the pole is stored, wrapped in the finest wool, in the garage.
Not mounting.
For their 7 annual Festivus gatherings so far, Leanne and Mark Yarvis of Portland, Oregon, have invented their own tradition that specifies the pole must be borrowed and brought by a guest. A flagpole with a gold eagle on top has been among those that have served. The pole is then passed around during the airing of grievances. Whomsoever holds the pole must grieve. Some people are shy about it, but if you're handed the pole, it's clearly your turn, Leanne, 36, says. It puts people on the spot. It helps break the shyness. We don't want anybody to weasel out.
Topping.
While topping is not at all necessary, some, like Troy Kinnaird and his chums in Detroit, Michigan, choose to add low-key, Seinfeld-inspired, untinsely headpieces to the pole. Since Junior Mints, a chocolate-covered candy which, in one episode of Seinfeld, accidentally drop into a patient's body during surgery, are often served at Festivuses, another plural of Festivus, it's worth considering puncturing the candy's white cardboard box and impaling it.
As an aphrodisiac.
Putting a pole in the middle of a room at a party can attract strippers. At West End Comedy Theater's 2004 Festivus celebration in Dallas, which advertised for the non-denominational and inoffensive get-together, female comedians took turns dancing provocatively with the pole. Party organizer Doug Ewart was stunned and pleased. Set up under a spotlight on the comedy club's stage, the pole saw more action than anyone else, Ewart says. I thought it was a pretty neat development. He adds that the pole will definitely be a part of future Festivus festivities.
For limbo.
Limbo, limbo, how low can you go?
While it's true that the ready availability of a metal pole can lead to some destructive party behavior, impromptu indoor baseball, apple hockey, and pretend Superman bend the rod until herniating not least among them. There is one primitive pole-based party activity that has lent itself perfectly to the spontaneous nature of Festivus. My friend Dan always ends up starting a game of limbo, says Sarah King, 29, a psychology graduate student who hosts an annual Festivus party in Halifax, Canada. Dan Boudreau, a medical student, is the 3 years running Festivus Limbo champion of Halifax. Here are the basic rules of Festivus Limbo Halifax style. Start the music. Recommended, The Limbo Rock by Chubby Checker. Limbo anko limbo ni, bend back like a limbo tree. 2 players hold the pole at either end, and the rest of the players form a line and try to pass under the pole without touching it. Players cannot have any body part but their feet touching the floor. The pole gets lowered with each round. The last player left who has not grazed aluminum is the winner. The champion receives a shot of Sambuca. Then everyone else does shots of Sambuca too. A warning: after Limbo, the pole, now loose on the dance floor, cannot be trusted. We used a coat rack one year, Sarah says. It got smashed all up and ended up in bed with me. I passed out, and I have no idea what happened. I woke up the next morning, and it was all in pieces in my bed.
Not having one.
On the evidence, not having a pole can lead to over-intellectualization of Festivus. Scott McElemy, a Washington, D.C.-based columnist for Inside Higher Ed, filed this piece explaining his decision to go poleless. He requests that no one leave a comment on his blog, www.maclemy.com, telling him exactly where he can stick a pole should he choose to purchase one next year.
Each year, my wife and I invite friends to gather around the aluminum pole. Or at least the place it would be if we ever got around to buying one, and discuss the true meaning of Festivus. After long cogitation, I've concluded that Festivus is the postmodern invented tradition par excellence. In the pre-modern era, when people lived in villages, spring would draw near and everybody would think, time for the big party where we all eat and drink a lot and pretend for a few days not to notice each other humping like bunnies. People didn't say, we do X because it is our tradition. But then, starting maybe 300 years ago, things got modern. And so, according to historian Eric Hobsbawm, people started inventing traditions. In the 19th century, folks started singing traditional Christmas carols, even though for a couple hundred years they celebrated with regular church hymns. Postmodernism is what happens after you've been modern so long that being modern doesn't seem special. You start putting things in quotation marks. I could cite stuff here about the decline of meta-narratives and the simulacrum. I guess I just did. So Festivus is a postmodern, invented tradition. All the vague hostility of enforced togetherness gets an outlet. It's hard to get sentimental about an aluminum pole, but as long as there are midwinter holidays, the spirit of Festivus will fill the air.
The question of tinsel.
They say tinsel is forbidden on Festivus. Too distracting. The tinsel industry will survive the indignity, says Marcia Seppos, owner of the Tinsel Trading Company in New York City. Tinsel was used going back to the 1700s, Seppos notes. It's still used now. Designers such as Ralph Lauren, Eli Tahari, and Nanette Lepore have sewn Seppos's tinsel into their recent clothing lines. Fly fishermen also use it to craft lures. Anyway, sighs Stephen Soprano, store manager of Holiday Tree and Trim in Bayonne, New Jersey, the increasing amount of people who celebrate the holidays with artificial trees have been shunning tinsel for years. With the natural trees people used in earlier eras, tinsel gets thrown away when the dried-out tree is tossed, requiring new tinsel be purchased every year. But with fake trees that are reused annually, one application of tinsel lasts forever. You put the stuff on there, Soprano says, it's going to be a pain to take off there. Soprano says he's not scared of losing a few more tinsel sales to Festivus. We may get stuck with the product, he says, but we'll probably use it to decorate around here.
The Human Fund, the Festivus fruitcake, and other gifts.
One of the attributes of Festivus is that there are no required gifts, no expected gifts, and, usually, no gifts at all. On the Festivus episode of Seinfeld, the character George Costanza dreams up a fake charity called the Human Fund as a way to give people he doesn't care about a gift that costs him nothing. He hands office mates a card informing each that a donation has been made in his or her name to the fund. The card explains the Human Fund, money for people. Many real-world Festivites simply copy Costanza, handing out Human Fund cards. Others do give actual gifts. These have included used chapsticks left in pockets from long-ago ski trips, bulky handcuffs, and annoying talking dolls, all of which seem to establish a universal Festivus gift creed. Give only something you don't want that you expect the recipient doesn't want either. And remember, nothing is considered more useless and unwanted than a fruitcake.
The foods and drinks of Festivus.
Fun, surliness, and creativity. These apparent essences of 21st century Festivus are on view in what the holiday sends to the stomach. I've pulled together some recipes developed by the Festivus Forward and details about ongoing food fights. I don't want to add to your list of grievances, so I won't read them here. Not the best fare for an audiobook. But I know you'll want to check them out, so the producers have added them as a bonus feature. Just pop the disc into your computer, double-click on the Festivus icon, and you're set. Happy eating. Now, on to the nasty beer wars of Festivus. The 3 known attempts to distill the essence of Festivus into a beer have not surprisingly brewed conflict and controversy. Festivus has always proven to have no essence to distill, except undistillability. A cantankerous energy seems to result from efforts to bottle it. A homebrew named Festivus in a little Wisconsin town triggered a nasty spat between local Protestants and Catholics. In Maryland, the mere mention of St. Festivus Ale stokes the simmering anger of its Baltimore brewer. And in Arizona, a fruity microbrew named Festivus continues to fuel a nasty snit fit between the former and present owners of a troubled Phoenix brewery. Here are dispatches from the 3 battle-scarred Festivus beer fronts.
Dateline, Neenah, Wisconsin. Parents at St. Gabriel Elementary School near Appleton ignored complaints there was something unseemly about raising money for the Catholic school's arts program by hosting a massive beer-drinking festival in the auditorium. There was some concern around the whole general idea of having this fest at the school, said Mark Van Rossum, parent and member of Appleton Libation Enthusiasts, ALE, Ale. But you know, they also have fish fries and bingo. Ale's entry into the Homebrew Fest was Festivus, a red, hoppy ale inspired by Seinfeld and served from an old-fashioned English beer pump engine. It was the most popular beer at the event, attended by about 400 beer drinkers who paid $25 each admission. No brawls were reported at the festival. The brawls came later. The Catholic Church is the only church that does a lot of fundraising with alcohol, griped Pan Garman, a Lutheran who sent a furious letter to a local newspaper after reading about the school's beer festival. It's accepted, but that doesn't mean it's right. Betsy Benoit, a Methodist, who, like Garman, did not have a child enrolled in the school, also wrote an angry letter. What kind of example is that giving to our children? She fumed. Ruffled at the insinuations that her school might spawn a class of fifth-grade alcoholics, St. Gabriel Principal Mary Jo Brown was terse. It was a private thing, she said, refusing to comment in depth. Ale was not so reticent. In Wisconsin, Van Rossum said, it's part of the lifestyle, and they got permission from the priest. Dateline, Baltimore, Maryland. During the Baltimore Ravens' 2000-2001 run through the National Football League playoffs, superstitious coach Brian Billick forbade anyone associated with the team from using the word playoffs. As a result, offensive lineman Edwin Mulatalo came up with an alternative name for the postseason, Festivus Maximus. The only problem was that 2 miles from the Raven Stadium, Steve Fraser and Chris Cashel, brewmasters at the Brewer's Art Pub, were already serving a winter beer they developed 2 years prior and dubbed St. Festivus Ale, a dark intoxicant that boasts hints of bitter curacao, orange peel, and fresh ginger. The Ravens went on to win the Super Bowl, and the word Festivus will live in the hearts of Baltimore citizens forever. It meant much more than this obscure, to some people, reference to Seinfeld, says Janine DeVisker, who curated the Festivus Maximus Super Bowl exhibition at the Maryland Historical Society in March 2001. It was this moment for celebrating the Ravens' win and the city, the whole attempt to bring Baltimore back. Baltimore, the city that had such a high murder rate and so many challenges that it was a citywide celebration. That this is a place people want to be and want to be part of. We were celebrating that. That was Festivus. All that feel-good hullabaloo angers the hell out of Fraser every time a fan tromps into his bar and praises him for naming the ale after the triumph. There was no connection, Fraser spits, maintaining that he and Cashel were the first to borrow the name from Seinfeld, not the Ravens. Fraser continues to tap the season's St. Festivus every November, and swears it will fortify him to bash the heads of any lawyers from the Ravens or anyone else who shows up at his bar and starts demanding royalties. Moderate drinking of St. Festivus ale, he warns, encourages the airing of grievances. Heavy drinking encourages feats of strength. Dateline, Phoenix, Arizona. John Watt, former owner of the Sonora Brewery in Phoenix and creator in 2002 of a malty ale he dubbed Festivus, believes his creation was a huge success. It was very well received, said Watt, who promoted the ale at a Spring Festivus '04 party, which also featured a human gyroscope ride. It was one of our faster movers. Watt's assistant brewer at the time, Scott Yarosh, scoffed at his old boss's memory. It sold well in October, Yarosh said. The rest of the year, it didn't. In 2005, Yarosh bought the brewery from Watt, who moved to Oregon, where his new job is repairing automobile glass. For Yarosh, Festivus is finished. I never really liked the name, he says, because of the Seinfeld connotations. I didn't want to get into a political thing. If someone wasn't a fan of Seinfeld, I didn't want them to not like my beer. Yarosh has different ideas about how to name beers so they'll sell well. Burning Bird Pale Ale is a name he prefers over Festivus. Watt says his former underling was always putting forth terrible marketing ideas. Killing Festivus is another one. He's missing an opportunity, Watt says. What's his deal? Yarosh doesn't care what Watt thinks. I wouldn't, he says, call him a friend.
Unlike Festivus beer, Festivus wine has, so far, been a success. It could be that the idea of bottling wine in the town where Woody Guthrie was born pleases the "this land was made for you and me" spirit of Festivus. Or it could be that a holiday that first flourished in southern Italy prefers being accompanied by the fruit of the vine rather than the ferment of dusty grain. Our ranch is 700 acres in Oklahoma, says Jack Whiteman, co-owner of Grape Ranch in Okemah, which in 2004 sold 200 cases of its Festivus Red, a Merlot Cabernet blend. And we have some oil and gas properties on it. We had 40 acres there that was crappy, sandy soil and nothing would grow. So we thought maybe we'd grow grapes on there, and darned if it didn't take off. Because the first grapes weren't planted until 2002, the first ranch-cultivated wine won't be ready to drink until 2007. But Whiteman wanted to start building his brand. He bought a load of wine from California's Carmel Valley, bottled it at the ranch, and started thinking of a marketable name. I was always a Seinfeld fan and thought it would have some marginal interest, he says, but it has had a lot of interest. He anticipates selling 1,000 cases of Festivus Red at its $16 a bottle retail price in 2005. We're hoping to sell it to people who are throwing Festivus parties, which are really taking off. Which begs the question such party throwers may want answered. How does the stuff taste? Here's a review of Festivus Red by Jim Clark, wine critic for the respected website for culinary insiders, starchefs.com.
The Grape Ranch Festivus Red 2002 is medium ruby in color, fading to a violet-pink rim. The nose is dominated by fruity aromas and a stab of alcohol. There are clear notes of blackberry, Bing cherry, and plum, while more subtle, spicy aromas of cedar and clove round out the wine. The fruit-forward character continues on the palate, while the spices broaden into touches of chocolate and vanilla. These non-fruity elements suggest the tasteful use of oak aging. However, the only place where oak really steps forward is in the tannins. The pull of wood tannins on the cheeks is gently apparent, while grape tannins, which typically show themselves in the front of the mouth, are pretty much non-existent. It would make for a good cocktail wine, quite suitable to parties. Festivus Red should be fairly flexible and won't overwhelm many foods. Barbecue, hamburgers, and many chicken and pork dishes should get along well with it. The wine's only serious flaw is the alcohol. As noted on the nose, there are some balance issues here. The bottle says 13.4% alcohol, which is fairly typical for a California red. However, while the wine is not too weighty in the mouth, the flavors do not keep pace with the alcohol in the finish, leaving instead a rather strong burning sensation in the throat.
At the Festivus Party. The airing of grievances.
Festivus is celebrated because people want to celebrate it, not because they have to. Fundamentally, people don't like having to lie, even if a little white lie can smooth a social situation. So, at Festivus time, they don't. Instead, there is truth-telling. It starts moments after guests arrive. Gushing at someone that their aluminum pole is beautiful, a real nice pole, mocks all the times people feel social pressure to make comments like, "Nice above-ground pool, Mike," and "What a wonderful display of rat pelt coats, Marie, using them as wallpaper in the baby's room, wonderful." But such metaphorical subtlety as pole praising is for early in the Festivus evening. Eventually, most Festivus nights veer straight into the meat of the matter, the moment which never seems to come at proper social occasions, people telling others what they really think of them. This is the airing of grievances.
Traditional.
Like everything else Festivus, the AOG has evolved some wild variations, but the core of it remains lashing into others and the world about how they have been disappointments. This usually brings participants into a circle of sorts in which each takes turns excoriating friends, enemies, relatives, acquaintances, and strangers. When all who care to have taken a turn griping, there is no required hugging or making up. That said, it is no mere coincidence that wrestling and other aggression-absorbing feats of strength generally follow immediately after the AOG. Here are 10 classic grievance examples. Some of these were against the world, some against enemies, some against stupid people, and some against people's own damn selves. At Festivus gatherings around the planet, they were shouted, scrawled in dry erase pens on refrigerators, entered into permanent ledgers, pasted on poles, and posted on websites. I want this house to be decluttered, and I want you to get rid of all these ridiculous stuffed tigers. Avi's mom never called back. My brother breaks my video games. I don't give a crap how much it sucks to be handicapped. A $200 fine for using a handicap spot illegally is way, way out of line. Hoser, your girth is seriously slowing down the sponge hockey team. I think candy canes suck, and wish that every fool that buys a cup of coffee at $4 a pop would spill it on their laps and destroy their reproductive organs. It's my belief that stupidity is inherited. Laura, is Blue Moon really the best pseudonym you could come up with? The federal government ran a record $413 billion budget deficit for the fiscal year 2004. Congress responded by passing the bloated 2005 omnibus budget package that was bursting with more than 11,000 pork projects. The House of Representatives shot down budget reform with the defeat of the Spending Control Act of 2004. The Burnham Plaza Theater. Your place is a dump and has been for 5 years. Motorists who leave top hats of snow on their car roofs are lazy. The entire sheet of snow can slide off, land on the person behind you, or hit their windshield like an exploding mattress. All right, you've heard how the rest of them do it. Now take some time and scrawl your own grievances, and be sure to leave them where that special someone can read them.
Non-traditional. Grievance fridges. Pole pinata. And the eternal ledger.
There are many clever ways to castigate. There are also many stupid ways. At Petros Kolivas's Festivus in Montreal, a dry erase marker is tied to the refrigerator door. The grievances are scrawled on it throughout the night and are legible until someone either rubs against the door or is thrown against it. The fridge was instituted, says Kolivas, a computer network consultant, because if we did air grievances face-to-face, it might get out of hand and people might start fighting. Moving south, a group in Missouri asks everyone at their party to write a grievance down on a piece of paper and then stuff it inside the Festivus pole. At the end of the night, the pole, made of cardboard painted silver, is broken open like a piñata, papers spill out like candy, and the grievances are read aloud. At Krista Soroka's bash in Tampa, a fake leather ledger book waits on a side table. Guests approach and enter grievances in it all night long. Gripes about the injustice of Ronnie getting a girlfriend, the engorged size of the New York Yankees payroll, the pathetic state of Florida's interstate road system, and the worst power grid ever. The book is kept year-round on Soroka's coffee table for visitors to mull over.
Grievances versus flattery.
Most non-traditional airing of grievances methods hew to the traditional idea of allowing people to unmitigatingly spew disappointment. But New Orleans, always roiling with spooky contradictions, figured out how to both celebrate and undermine the AOG. At Festivus, the holiday market for the rest of us, held in December 2004 on Magazine Street, attendees were invited to write grievances on slips of paper and affix them to a Festivus pole. Hundreds of people aired complaints like, "Don't call me to place an order unless you actually know what you want." "I hate the NOPS payroll department." "I singed off my eyebrows." And, "Why does my roommate insist on singing opera at all times?" In another homage to Seinfeld, the market featured a regifting station, where items including chipped vases and a shadow box display of golf tchotchkes were dropped off and free to anyone who wanted them. Tags explain the history of each item, says Renee Ali, who had the paid position of Festivus coordinator. That stuff kept moving. The table was small and there was stuff all over it. Among the 50 local vendors actually selling things, there was a booth from the Native American Hauma tribe, where flower pins made from garfish scales were for sale. The gar, which has a mouth lined with needle-like fangs, is like the ancient Roman saperda, nasty. So that much was within Festivus tradition. What might not sit so well with Festivus fundamentalists, those who believe the Seinfeld text of Festivus is meant to be taken literally and no embellishment is allowed, was the Festivus Market's flattery booth, held in a colorful tent named the Office of Homeland Serenity. Here, 8 Festivus flatterers were assigned to shower 1 minute of praise on anyone who requested it. They said things like, "You look fabulous," Ali says. One flatterer played a ukulele and sang improv songs about people. The fundamentalists can take heart. Bootlicking lost out to complaining. While about 180 people asked for flattery during the 6-day event, more than 400 aired grievances.
16-year-old Kyla and her friends air grievances.
Kyla Ide and her friends love Festivus. They do it more than once a year. They used to gather in Ide's living room in Timmins, Ontario, until her mother got sick of Festivus and forbade it in the house. Recent festivi have taken place outside in the snow. They use a vacuum cleaner as their pole, the only option they can afford on their allowance-based incomes. They burn tinsel. Then they grieve. Oh, how they grieve.
Here are the grievances my friends and I remember, by Kyla Ide. Courtney, you're a terrible sister. You're the dumbest one in your class and think you're better than everyone. I expected so much more than what you've become. Courtney was about 6 years old at the time. When we're writing a script, you always tell everyone that you came up with my ideas. Your hair is disgusting. You wear your pants too low. You're terrible at basketball. Stop playing for my team. I've never looked at your back without seeing a thong. We know you lie about being a natural blonde. You have hair sticking out of your nose. Your boyfriend's generally unattractive. I slept with your wife. Chris, even though you chew gum and everything, we can still smell your breath. So don't stand so close to us when you talk. Stop laughing at your own jokes. You write bad poetry. We know you listen to techno. We were starting to run out of bad things to say to each other, so we started pretending that we had other guests by doing interpretations of them. For example, I remember telling John in my grandma's voice, "John, your pants are too long. You can't see your nice shoes." And then making it more of a general grandmother's complaint. "I don't like Alanis Morissette. Her hair is too stringy." And, "I like Celine Dion, but she's a wretched-looking thing." And, "Boys who have dreadlocks will murder you in the streets."
Oops, maybe that was the end of the freaking, yeah, that was the end of it. I don't understand why. But anyway, you get the gist of Festivus. We didn't get to the feats of strength. The feats of strength, man. And like I told Dad tonight, uh, 1 year, because Festivus doesn't end until the host gets pinned. And I hadn't been pinned. And it was going on for a week. Festivus was going on for a week after December 23rd. And I was telling Mom about it. God rest her soul, and I miss her. And she said, "What? You need to be pinned?" And I was like, "Yeah, Festivus. Friggin' feats of strength. I haven't been pinned yet." She comes up to me and places her hands on my shoulder and says, "You have been pinned, Rob." It felt so good. It really felt so good that Festivus was over and I was pinned by my mom. Alright, happy Festivus, people.